Hi class, welcome back. Hopefully you guys feel like experts with domain. So today we're going to learn on how to identify and describe range of a linear graph. So today's objective is just to identify and describe range of a graph. Range is a big idea in math, but it can be thought of or understood by thinking about a single point. Like we said before, our order pair is an x and y coordinate. So remember, it's just a bunch of single points, your x and your y, to make order pairs, right? So the definition of range is set of possible y values or outputs. So for range, we're looking at our y. So we're looking at our y value. With domain, we're looking at x. Range, we're going to be looking at y. So identify the y values of each points below. So we're not looking at the x anymore, we're looking at the second number of the order pair, which is your y. And on these, we're looking at 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, if we want to identify the range of the points, again, we're looking at the y values. We're looking at the second number of the order pair. On this one, it's going to be 2, 4, 6, and 8. Again, same thing. Asking to identify the y values is the exact same thing as asking to identify the range. I'm going to move it up a little bit. So given the following representations, identify the range. So for example C, again, we're going to be looking at all our y values, which is our second number of the order pair. So we're looking at all the y values of each order pair. On this case, it's going to be 1, 1, 3, and 5. Here's the thing, 1 repeated, you don't need to repeat or duplicate a value. So again, we're going from smallest to greatest because order matters, but you don't have to repeat. Okay, so I'm going to make a little side note. Don't need to repeat. And that's a T. And I would say just duplicate values. If a number repeats, you only need to write it down once. So my range on this one, I'm going to just do an R for range. It's going to be 1, 3, and 5 because I don't need to repeat the 1. Okay, looking at example D, again, we're using all our y values, which is 5, 6, and 9. So I just need to write down 5, 6, and 9. Okay, on domain, we're looking at our x values. Now we're just doing range. So if we are using a table, we're looking at the second part, this part. This is perfectly in order. So we go from smallest to biggest. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So again, the y value is your range. We're looking at the range. Okay, I'm going to move it up. Okay, we looked at a table that was vertical. Now we're looking at a horizontal table for example F. And we're looking at our outputs or y values, which are in this case here. So for this one, we're looking at 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so on the range, we're looking at our y-axis. We're going to look at all our y values. So we're looking where it lands on the y-axis, which is here. Okay, so we're looking for the lowest point to the highest. So we're going to start at the bottom with B, because B is our lowest point, and it hits the y-axis at -4. Then I'm going to go to E. E hits the y-axis at -1. Next, I'm going to go up to C. C hits the y-axis at +1. Now we're going to go to A. It hits the y-axis at +2. Lastly, for D, it's going to hit the y-axis at +5. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the next page. Again, so think about it as a big map. In order to use domain and range, it's narrowing it down to where you need to look. For domain, we kind of narrowed it down between 4th and 5th Street if we were looking for Chaffee on a map of Ontario. For range, we're going to say it's between Euclid and San Antonio. So again, imagine a large coordinate grid and you're looking for your graph. Knowing the range lets you pinpoint where in the graph you need to look. So for my range on this one, we're asking you to look between -2 and 7, which are going to be our y values. So if I want to highlight there, -2 on the graph is going to be right here. So I'm just going to highlight it, pretend I hit the line perfectly. And then 7 is going to be right about there. Okay, so my 7 is going to be there. So again, my range that I'm looking at on this giant grid is between -2 and +7. So I want to just look at this area. So we're looking in here. We can ignore the other area. We're just looking specifically in that area. That's going to be your range. Okay, I'm going to move it up a little bit more. So we're going to practice finding our range. So range describes the y values of your graph. It's easy to identify the range when you have individual points as seen below. So we're going to work on example I. Remember, we're looking at where it hits on your y-axis. So I highlighted the y-axis. I'm going to take one point at a time. I'm going to go from the lowest point, which is A. Hold on. And it hits at -2. My next point up is B, and it hits at -1 on the y-axis. Point C is right at 0. Point D is at +1. Point E is at +2. So my range is -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Okay, again, if we're looking at a segment, the segment is going to tell you between which points it falls in. On this one, let me highlight my y-axis again. My A is the lowest point of the segment and it hits at 2, so my range is between -2. Sorry, I just said 2, but it's -2. And the highest point of that segment is actually right there. It's 0. Okay, again, we have points on this grid, and so I'm looking at that point which falls on 1, and my next point falls on 2. Okay, so for example K, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. The lowest point of this graph is going to be right here. That's my lowest point right there. And it falls on the y-axis on -1. So my range is between -1 and the highest point of this segment is right here, which falls on positive 1. So my range is between negative 1 and positive 1. Okay, for example, L, the lowest point of the segment is right there, which is negative 4. So my range is between negative 4 and the highest point, which is positive 2. Okay, so again, please take your time when watching the video. Pause it at any time. You can replay any part of it. And I hope you understand domain and range at this point. Have a good one.